video today. Why is it so special? Because today I will be reviewing not one, but two, count them, two shows today. And not only that, I'll be putting both shows head to head and seeing which one was better. That's right, folks. It's a double review and a versus video all in one.
If you're not familiar with my blog at all, my versus posts are not anything new, and the premise is quite simple. I take two anime shows, characters, concepts, etc., and see which one I thought was better. And to examine that, I take a look at what both sides did right and what they got wrong, and then give my opinion on which one was better and explain why I went for whichever one I thought was better.
Now I know what you're thinking. Why go this far for a double review and a versus? Well, because I'll be talking about two of the biggest shows to come out of 2019. In fact, these shows were so big that they came out at the exact same time. Yeah, now y'all know what I'm talking about. The explosive demon killing and scientific stone crushing Fire Force and Dr. Stone.
As I said before, these two shonen shows were some of the summer's and 2019's biggest hits. And not only did they come out at the exact same time, they were also dubbed at the same time, with both shows getting English dubs aired on the Toonami block before the year ended. But which one of these shows was superior? Or at least had an edge to it that the other didn't have?
Well, sit back and find out in Hanime on Anime's first ever double review and versus video. But before I get into that, and trust me, I've got quite a bit to cover, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this, but I do want to explain how this is all going to work since this is the first time that I've done a video like this. So, for the most part, it's going to be like my versus posts. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, and that's probably all you really need to know at this point. So, but if you're really wanting to know more about the rankings, you'll hear about those at the very end. But with that out of the way, in this corner we have the fiery, kick-butt, supernatural shonen show, and on this corner we have the scientifically packed show to move mountains. Let's see which one of them did better. Let's start things off with Fire Force.
From the mind that brought you Soul Eater, Fire Force sets itself in a world on fire both figuratively and literally. Some individuals can randomly combust and become monsters known as Infernals. To combat these Infernals, special units with some possessing some level of pyrokinesis called the Fire Force are sent in. Shinra Kusakabe, a third-generation pyrokinetic who can light his feet on fire at will, joins the Fire Force Company 8 along with a colorful cast of fiery characters. Soon, Shinra and Company 8 start to learn some dark and disturbing secrets about the Force involving corruption and even some bits of human experimentation that takes its audience for a wild ride. And that's actually a really great way of putting this show. It's a wild ride. For better and for worse.
I'll admit, Fire Force was probably my personal favorite of the two shows, but it wasn't entirely flawless. And we'll get to that later, but for now, let's talk about what Fire Force got right.
Among other highlights, the characters were what really held the show together. Everyone in the show is quirky and funny enough to make a lasting impression on the audience. In particular, Shinra is a great protagonist. We have a clear understanding of his motivation and desires, and you genuinely want to see him pull through. And he's also pretty entertaining. The whole idea of him being able to light his feet on fire, as really hilarious as that sounds, is also a fun idea for the show, and it leads to some really great action scenes. Another thing too that I liked, that I don't get why anybody really mentions this at all, is this really strange quirk that Shinra has where he smiles every time he's nervous or anxious, making it appear he finds a certain situation funny or amusing when really he's not. It's something neat about his character that I liked that I, strangely enough, remembered, and it also plays a role in his backstory and how a lot of people viewed him. It may be overlooked, but I think it plays a big part of Shinra's character, and I liked it for that. I also loved, too, how this show is shot, which, for an animated show like this, it sounds strange, but I have no other way of putting it except it's shot incredibly well. This show looks and feels very cinematic, almost like it's a movie. You can tell that a lot of talent and effort went into this from the backgrounds and the cinematography, but I guess it shouldn't be that surprising given that David Productions, the studio that gave us JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, was behind it.
So far, Fire Force starts off with great characters and great cinematography, and I'll even argue a great story. But there is one or two elements that does set it back a little bit. Let's talk about what Fire Force got wrong.
In looking at Fire Force as a whole, I found that the show has one massive flaw to it. And to understand that, here's the show's overall concept. A spunky young protagonist joins or is already part of a powerful fighting force set to kill some odd creature or creatures, all while uncovering some hidden secrets along the way. Why does this sound familiar? Yeah, I think you probably know what I'm getting at right now. Despite that the show is cool and its idea of having a force of firefighters actually fighting fire, sometimes with actual fire, the core concept of the show has been done before. I've seen others shown in shows like it. It's as if Soul Eater and Blue Exorcist had a baby. In fact, the mangaka who wrote Fire Force the manga is the same one who wrote the manga for Soul Eater. And that actually does this show a disservice, because there are at least two other shows that are very similar to it. It doesn't feel fresh or exciting. You could watch these other shows and almost get an idea of how this one is going to turn out, even with its own original story. And also, as another issue, and speaking of story, I felt like the pacing of the overall plot was rushed. The whole idea of Company 8 being this investigative unit kind of comes out of nowhere about 5 episodes in and immediately throws you into the action once this is revealed. It's very jarring when we start this particular arc of investigating other companies, and I really thought it could have been handled better.
So overall, while Fire Force has great characters, great cinematography, and as I mentioned earlier, I also think it's got a pretty decent story, it's old and has been done before, and add to the fact too that it feels like it's rushed from a certain point onward, it just feels mediocre.
Don't get me wrong, it's still good and worth checking out, but it certainly won't be anything fresh and new. But I'm sure that's not gonna really disappoint anybody.
And now that we've put out that fire, let's move on to Dr. Stone.
After a strange cataclysmic phenomenon turns the whole world to stone, humanity is sent back to a tech-free world nearly 4,000 years later. After being asleep for 3,700 years, a teenage science geek named Senku emerges along with his friends Taichiru and Yuzuhaku to pull humanity out of the Stone Age that they find themselves in. However, they face a big obstacle with the weirdly OP middle schooler who I swear does not look like a middle schooler, Tsubasa, who wants to keep the world in its current state to maintain peace. It's a shonen show of epic proportions set to make history, or rather prehistory, see what I did there, that has a lot going for it and against it.
I remember hearing all about the hype that was surrounding this show, and after seeing a trailer for it, yeah, I was really interested in watching it. But then I actually watched the show and found one big problem with it. Just one big problem with it. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, let's talk about what Dr. Stone got right.
As morbid as this may sound, given the current circumstances many of us find ourselves in with the coronavirus, Dr. Stone had one of the most unique apocalypses I've seen in anime. Most of humanity, and weirdly enough, some birds like sparrows, are turned to stone. It's a strange but almost kind of cool end of the world situation, but at the same time, it's also kind of terrifying. With how sudden it happens and how long it lasts, this is actually a pretty scary apocalypse. I'd actually rank it with my top 10 anime end of the world scenarios. And if its end of the world scenario wasn't neat enough, the world it creates afterwards is also really cool. The whole idea of the world of Dr. Stone being this Stone Age-like setting is really neat, and I don't think I've seen anything quite like it before. It was like watching Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal mixed with Lord of the Flies, but with more talking and more science, and less heart and no dinosaurs. It sets the stakes high for the characters given that they're used to living in a technology-filled world, but it still makes it kind of fun, again in the sense that it's like a prehistoric action romp, but with more brains. Speaking of brains, this was another unique aspect of the show that you don't really see in anime that much either. There's actual science not only being used, but explained. The idea of having real science be integral in a show is not something new in anime. But in a world like Dr. Stone, it works because the characters are put in a world where you have to get creative with what you have because technology won't save you. Having actual scientific facts be an element of the show brings a sense of logic and reality to the show that many shonen shows don't have. It makes this world feel real and the danger just as much.
So, yeah, Dr. Stone actually has a lot of great stuff going for it. I mean, it's got a really neat concept, has a pretty decent grasp on reality, and yeah, like I said, it's got a cool apocalypse situation, which, I guess given the situation right now, that's probably not the best thing to say, but I still think it's neat. However, despite that all of these great elements move the show up 2 steps forward, there's one big problem that moves it 1 step back. Let's talk about what Dr. Stone got wrong. So I know what you're thinking at this point. Of all of the praise that I have given the show thus far, what did Dr. Stone possibly get wrong? Well, let's just say that there's 10 billion% of a chance that it's it's Senku. Yep, you heard me right. It's Senku. He's awful. He is an awful main character. In fact, he is not only one of the worst main characters I have seen to come out of the 2019 anime lineup, he is one of the worst anime protagonists I have ever seen in anime, period. Oh, I'm well aware of that. that's not going to stop me from talking about this.
Looking at what I've seen of the show, there's 3 reasons why I believe Senku is an awful main character.
Reason number 1, he's a jerk!
Now, in saying that, this may sound like a ridiculous notion because if you look at other movies, TV shows, books, and yes, other anime, there have been many protagonists that are jerks. However, there's a difference between being the Okabe from Steins Gate kind of jerk and the Subaru kind of jerk from Re:Zero. One of them has enough charm and likability that when things go wrong for him, you feel bad for him. And the other is Subaru.
Don't be like Subaru. Which may not be the best example, but this happened, and it pissed a lot of people off, so it counts.
Which leads me to Senku. There is no likability or charm in this guy that makes you want to root for him. Senku is a cocky butthole who makes it apparent to everyone, even without saying it, what a genius he is. On top of that, he treats the people around them like they're disposable, even his closest friends. The first time we meet Senku, he tries to convince his friend Taichiro to drink this quote-unquote love potion he made that would supposedly help him tell his crush Yuzuhaku how he feels. But what he doesn't tell Taichiro is that this love potion was, I kid you not, gasoline.
That's 30 years to life in prison if that went wrong!
So yeah, acting like a know-it-all, even though a lot of what he says is right, I can't even deny that. And treating his friends like crap, coming dangerously close to killing him. Senku is a jerk in every unlikable way.
Reason number 2 why Senku is a bad protagonist is that he's not a realistic character.
If Senku is in fact the genius the show makes him out to be, that does make him a very unique character. But let's look at this from a realistic standpoint. If we think about geniuses in the sense of IQ, about 2% of the world's population would be considered geniuses. And while that number roughly translates to anywhere between 200 to 300 million people compared to the 8 billion global population, which, don't get me wrong, is a significant number of people, most people are not geniuses. So looking at that, most average people don't talk like Senku. Most average people don't think like Senku. Nobody would think to count for 4,000 years just to stay alive, would they? Of course not. While there is in fact a large pool of people that could understand Senku, most people will not.
Which leads me to reason number 3 why Senku is a bad protagonist. He's not relatable.
Because Senku talks and acts like a walking, talking encyclopedia and treats everyone around him like garbage, there's no reason to sympathize with him and what he's going through. We know full well that he can take care of himself, so why bother? Even though in episode 7, when we see that Senku did in fact struggle to adjust to the new world after waking up from his stone state, he still goes back to being a cocky bastard. So why should we feel for him? In fact, you almost want to see him fail more times than you want to see him succeed. I'm like the monkeys from episode 7 watching him fail constantly when he first wakes up. Now, to be fair, I do in fact hate cocky characters, though I'll explain that more in this. But the fact that people think Senku makes for a decent lead, let alone best protagonist of 2019, it's just... I don't know. I don't know what to say, except that there is a 10 billion% chance that for me, as a protagonist, Senku sucks.
Now, looking at both shows, having seen what works and what doesn't work, which one is the better show? Well, you might be a little surprised given the rant you heard me go on just a second ago, but it's Dr. Stone.
Like I said, this may seem like a surprise given that I spent a little longer time dissing its main character and being outright and stating that Fire Force was my favorite of the two shows. Well, I had to ask myself this question. Which of these two shows is more likely to have a stronger staying power? With that in mind, the obvious answer was Dr. Stone. Fire Force is a good show with a great story and great characters, but there have been other good shows just like it. It's old and it's been done before, sometimes better by its predecessors. So nothing about it is really fresh or original. That's not to say that Fire Force was bad, it's just there are other shows like it. Dr. Stone has a unique premise and a unique element to it that I can't say I've seen in other anime, or at least done as well or made it as integral as Dr. Stone has. Do I still think Senku alone is worth 2 problems for the show? Absolutely. I still think he's an awful lead. But I definitely say that it has a lot going for it that it's sure to stick with more people. So while both shows are good and are 2 of 2019's most talked about shows, Dr. Stone was the better choice here.
So what did you think? Did you think Dr. Stone was better, or did you think Fire Force was better? And did I upset anybody when I said Senku sucks? If so, then you're not going to like this video, because I go into more detail on that, and yeah. So if you're a fan, I don't think you'll like that video whatsoever. But maybe you'll have time to cool off, as there's no confirmed release date for it, and as it's still in production. But you'll probably like my Autism Awareness Month videos a lot better. And yes, I am bringing the month back, as I always do, as it's probably one of the more popular events that I have on my channel. Thanks, by the way. And I will make a formal announcement on that on my blog. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!